I decided to go with a piece of maple just for down and dirty here. Let's see how it's going to work. And I went with a piece of green maple. Get that knot out of it right there. Be a whole lot easier to get it on there, I'm sure, at that rate. Yeah, let's see what we got here. Okay, now remember, you can always cut the excess off and trim the handle down. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we got a good fit. Make sure we get this thing down as far as it'll go on here before we mess around with any of that. Alright. Really, the first thing I want to do, if I'm going to worry about messing with making this all nice and fancy and pretty, is I want to make sure that, first of all, it's not going to tear up. So, you know, I'm going to put it on the handle and take a few good swings at a tree with it. Bury it in there a few times and see how it acts. Make sure I'm not going to break that thing no matter what I do. You can see that thing's going deep into that pine. Come back and collect a bunch of pine sap off of that this winter. Okay, that thing's not going anywhere. So if I had to, I could just carry the blade, make a quickie handle on the fly, and I still got something I can cut with. Well, my friends, this is why they call it a squirrel cooker. I can adjust that guy anywhere I need to. Get my flames built up a little bit if I want to cook him faster. Right now I'm just kind of slow cooking him. Okay, so once we've got our fire going here, we can start our fire with pine or resinous woods that will help us make a quick fire. But we don't want to cook over that type of fire. So what we're going to do is we're going to let that stuff burn down to a coal bed like we have here. And then we're going to add hardwood on top of that to create the smoke and heat that's going to cook our meat. We just want that initial coal bed in there to provide heat, but we don't want those resinous fumes coming up and making contact with our meat because it'll make it taste foul. So now we're just adding small pieces of hardwood to keep ourselves a little bit of flame and a nice hot coal bed to cook this squirrel. And then it's real easy to turn this dude on this squirrel cooker. I just adjusted it down just a little bit there. A little bit closer to the fire. That's easy to do with this. Easy to rotate. Works great for cooking small pieces of meat and small game. Once we've taken this thing and we've given it a test run and we beat on it pretty good, we know that handle's not going to slip. At that point we can start to thin down our handle to something that's more manageable and not so big and bulky. And we can take our time doing this. This is something we can do around the campfire at night. Not something we got to be in a big hurry about. The advantage to these hand forged tools like this tomahawk head, the fro, and things like that are that you don't have to carry the handle with you. You can carry the tool itself, make the handle on the fly, which is another reason that I've always advocated wooden handled axes. Because if you break that handle for some reason, you can fabricate another if you have to. It's not to say that it's an easy chore to put an axe handle on in the woods, because it's really not that easy, but it can be done. Much easier than trying to replace a plastic handle that's broke off and you've got the head all epoxied at the top and all of that stuff. So now we'll just take our time carving this handle down into something that we don't mind carrying, and then we will cut the excess off the top. We'll leave about a ½ an inch up there, just in case the head decides to slip up a little bit during use, and we'll have ourselves a pretty fine tomahawk. Now once I've got my squirrel cooked and I'm getting ready to make, something else to go with it, which I'm going to use Pathfinder trail rations here. I'm going to put some rice in here, mix some rice and squirrel meat together. But the point is, now that I've got that taken care of, it doesn't matter what kind of wood I put on here anymore, because now I'm just heating water. So if I put something that's got a little resin in there, it doesn't matter, as long as I get a nice hot quick fire to boil this water. Here's the thing, guys, when you're putting stuff in your pack and you're deciding what you're going to carry, obviously, living off the land is not something that's so easy to do that you can just afford not to ever carry any food. But at the same time, your skill level should enable you to obtain some meat sources. So if you can bring things with you to put with that food to give you those good carbohydrates and things that you need that you can't get from the meat, like rice, like breads, mixes to make breads like bannocks and things like that. It's exactly what the old-time pioneers did. They carried some jerk with them in times of famine, but for the most part, cornmeal, flour, coffee, salt, those were the things that they carried with them that took up the bulk of the weight of their food stores when they were packing, whether it was on their back, in a canoe, on a horse, whatever the case may be. They weren't packing a lot of meat. Even long expeditions like Lewis and Clark's expedition, they recorded the things that they packed and carried with them or that they took on their expedition, and there was no meat in their list of what they took with them. But it was recorded in their journals that if it was available to them, the men of the expedition ate 9 pounds of meat per man per day. Now that's a ton of meat, more than any of us would ever eat in a day's time now. But considering the amount of workload that they had on them, the calories that they were burning, it's understandable why they would eat that much meat and that much protein so that they could metabolize that into energy. But in our case, we just need to think about what are the sundries or the groceries that we need to include in our pack setup, depending on how long we're planning on staying out in a woodland environment. If it's just a couple of days, maybe you just take a little bit of food with you. If it's a week, maybe you take more things that you can make with other types of food that you can capture or kill. Like I've got the squirrel, I'm going to mix it with some rice. These Pathfinder trail rations were designed exactly for that. That's why they're not meat sources. They're things that you put with meat to help you enjoy your meal and get more nutritional benefit from your meal. And that's what we're trying to do today. We're going to mix up this Spanish rice. We've already cooked our squirrel. We're going to cut it up into smaller pieces of meat and add it with our rice as it cooks down to give us a bit of a rice stew. There's enough meat on this squirrel when you combine it with something else for more than one meal, and that's an important thing to understand too. But you've got to be able to preserve meat as well if you plan to do something like that. And I'm not cutting this meat off, I'm just ripping it off, skin and all. Cook it down with this rice. Now, if I were really being conscious of, all the nutrients and the proteins and everything that I could possibly get out of this meat, I'd just be cutting the haunches off and boiling them right in that water, boiling the meat right off of them. But I've got the luxury of not having to worry about that, so I can just pull the meat off the bone and throw it in there. Okay, I wanted to show you guys something real fast here. This is that big pine that I tomahawked probably less than an hour ago. And you can see all these droplets of pine sap coming out of that injury already. That is great medicine, my friends. If you needed some antiseptic to put on a cut, that's an easy way to get it. Oh man, fellas. We are really, really looking good now. Holy cow. Starting to cook down. Boiling that meat in there, getting all that juice in there. Man, oh man. Another thing that's great about these squirrel cookers, you know, you can just rotate that thing around in the fire, out of the fire, so you can stir it back in the fire again. I really like that. You know, it's a piece of gear, weighs a little bit, but man, it sure saves you a lot of headaches and sure is convenient in a lot of ways. Well, fellas, I'll tell you what, that stuff cooked right down into a really nice, hearty stew type meal. Real hot. Oh, man. Put some chicken flavor in that rice. I was thinking that was Spanish rice, but it's not. It's like a chicken flavored rice. And it almost, unfortunately for me, maybe fortunate for some people, almost covers up the taste of that squirrel. It makes it taste like chicken. But I'll tell you, there's vegetables, rice in there. Got your carbs, you got your nutrients in there, vitamins. Put that squirrel in there and you got some protein. You got yourself a good hearty meal. Guys, I appreciate you joining me out for another video today. I thank you for your support, for your views and comments, for everything you do for me, for my school, my friends, sponsors, and affiliates. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys. Doggy. Bam. Golly. That's good.